In the meantime here, I want to put this up from the president's Twitter account there with the photo of the Angolan leader, President Lourenço. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's great to be in Angola. Let's talk about this trip even further with our friend, former diplomat, Brett Bruin. He joins me. Brett, good to see you here. I know you have extensive experience on the African continent. Is it safe to say that some people were scratching their heads why the Biden administration chose Angola to go to? Why not Kenya? Why not Nigeria? Why not elsewhere?
Well, it's interesting. Most Americans won't be familiar with Angola, but it's a pretty well-to-do country as African nations go. It has quite a lot of oil resources, and in fact, American oil companies have been developing those for a number of years. It has also been on a democratic journey over the last few years, having moved from the Dos Santos presidency, which was pretty authoritarian, pretty corrupt, towards something approximating a democracy. So, when an American president goes on those rare visits to Africa, they want to both obviously highlight those strategic relationships, but also reward those leaders who are doing the right thing. So that's why President Biden went to Luanda.
Yeah, and from what I understand, and from what's been reported, this is the first time a sitting U.S. president has visited Angola, so a first there. And is this better late than never? I mean, Biden made this commitment, I believe, in early 2022 when he hosted numerous African leaders at the Africa Summit in Washington, D.C. He committed to them. He would visit the continent before his presidency was over. His presidency will be over in just a matter of weeks here. So is the administration just checking a box?
Well, it is on the one hand, and let's not also forget this visit was postponed a few months because of some of the hurricane and other natural disaster issues here in the U.S. Nonetheless, I think what Biden is trying to do is set things in motion for Africa and the U.S.-Africa relationship. It's often been talked about in the coverage that we're doing this with an eye towards Beijing and what they are doing on the African continent, which is quite a lot. And we have lost a lot of ground, Andrew, not just to the Chinese, but even to the Russians. The Russians are now present all across West Africa. They've pushed out United Nations peacekeepers in some of those countries where they've successfully backed coups. They're also present in East Africa in places like Sudan. So we are trying to regain lost ground and, quite frankly, make up for lost time.
How might the incoming Trump administration, Brett, I guess, take up this mantle or this approach that the Biden administration is pursuing? Do we have any idea what their strategy might be towards Africa yet?
Well, look, on the one hand, I don't need to repeat Trump's famous words about Africa,
Right,
which were somewhat dismissive. That being said, this is one of those places where after 4 years in office, 4 years out of office, I think Trump and those around him are starting to appreciate, wait, Africa, both from an economic standpoint, a geopolitical standpoint, namely China, which Trump really does care about, is important. It's important that we show up. So I think we'll see a somewhat different approach to Africa. As you mentioned, I spent about half of my diplomatic career in places like Cote d'Ivoire, Madagascar, mostly Francophone Africa. And we just didn't get a whole lot of attention back in Washington. I don't think that will change markedly under Trump, but I think maybe a little bit.
Yeah. And anything else that you would like to glean out of this trip here? He will be headed back very soon. We were talking about, I have the readout in front of me from the White House about his meeting with the Angolan leader. They talked about shared commitments, also efforts to mediate the conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo here. What other agenda items struck out to you?
Yeah, look, there is a need, and we've seen it just, Andrew, in the last few months with Kenyan peacekeepers heading over to Haiti. There's a lot of conflict and coups and crisis, an unprecedented amount in the last few years on the African continent. So you're trying to shore up some of those countries which are doing all right, hopefully get their help in putting more pressure, engagement on those countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which has always been just a real problem in the middle, the heart of Africa. So Angola, lying just to its south, can apply a lot of pressure. It does have resources, as I mentioned. So you're hoping that they will step up as a regional player. And Africa, unfortunately, as I was mentioning before, has gotten divided up into Anglophone Africa, those English speaking countries, former British colonies, Lusophone Africa, which is the Portuguese former colonies, where Angola would fall in, and then the Francophone world as well. And so you're hoping to try to bridge some of those divides that even exist within the African continent.
So, Brett, this kind of dawned on me. I was reminded talking to you about another perceived Africa foreign policy failure on the part of the Biden administration, because I believe you and I last spoke about the African continent last year or early this year, when we saw a number of countries in West Africa fall to coup attempts, including Niger. And Niger, up until just about a few months ago, had somewhat of a minimal-sized U.S. force posture there and presence. Not anymore. Will that be somewhat of a stain on Biden's Africa legacy?
I think in general, Biden's Africa legacy is going to be one of neglect, despite having a summit, or even one of these visits does not a strategy make. And Biden really hasn't paid much attention to Africa, not even Secretary of State Blinken. So this is not going to be a bright spot in Biden's foreign policy. He has lost ground, as I said, when it comes to democracies, when it comes to stability, when it comes to showing up against countries like China. So Biden, unfortunately, is going to Africa, and it highlights his lack of engagement in those critical issues in those critical places. And historians will look back and judge. But I think it's fair to say that Biden has failed to advance the ball for America on the continent.
All right. Brett, while we have you, can't fail to bring this up with you about the events that transpired today in South Korea here. We also have this live picture right now. I want to show our viewers this. This is happening right now.